All right, so in the table we learned that you can do a lot of things. You can apply some styles, there's filtering options. We also know you can put in a total row. We did some split pane so we can see the top and the bottom, all those good things. Well, we know we can rename the table. I think this says table 1, but I think we call it art objects or something to that effect. But tables can be quite useful. The other thing that we want to do is sometimes if we want to go away from the table format, there's some other tools we can use that don't go along with tables. So we want to undo the table format here. And how we do that is, it's not really obvious, but over here under the table tools, you see convert to range. You guys see the convert to range button? If you click convert to range, and it says, do you really want to convert the table to a normal range? We say yes. And now this data, it left the formatting, but this group of data, these cells, are now not a table anymore, okay? They are just regular data, okay? And the reason we want to do that is there's a tool that we can use as well that is geared toward just regular data, okay? So everyone should have it back to a data. Yes, we're good? Okay. Another tool that's nice is something called the outline tool or the subtotal tool, which is nice to look at once. So let's take this whole bunch of data and let's sort it. So we'll go from A to H and we'll go up here to sort and let's sort it by category. So we want to see everything by category. I'm going to click OK. So we have installations, paintings, we also have sculptures, textiles, all those good things. Well, we're going to learn in a few moments how we summarize that with a pivot table, but another tool we can use is something called the subtotal tool. So if we go under data, so under the data tab, you guys see data?
Quick question.
Yeah.
What did you do to sort it by categories?
Highlighted all the data. We go over to sort, data, sort.
Okay.
My data has headers because in the first row is headers. And I'm going to sort by category A to Z. Okay, so that'll put it in category A to Z.
Got it.
Okay. Now, if I go to the Data tab, and under the Data tab, under Outline, you guys see the Outline group over here to the right? There is a selection that says Subtotal. Okay, make sure you have everything highlighted. I do. Okay, and it says Subtotal. And it recognizes it as a table, and it's saying, okay, what kind of subtotal do you want? So at each change in, okay, so right now what it's saying is, where do you want me to throw down a subtotal? If I left it at this, at each change in art ID, every row is going to get a subtotal. So it's going to go from, like, for example, the art ID is going to go from 21 to 34. So it says, hey, art ID changed, I'm going to throw out a subtotal. Then it goes from 34 to 63, I'm going to throw out a subtotal. So what do you think we want to do and throw out a subtotal at what change in what? What do you think is, because we're going to summarize this by what? What did I just sort it by? Category. So I want to say, hey, let's throw out a subtotal at each change in category. So it's going to go installation, 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 up. Now painting, it's going to throw out a subtotal because, hey, category change, right? I have a new grouping of things. So at this point, it's going to do it at category. Now, we can do different functions. Sum, count, average, min, max. Let's just leave it at sum and ask us what we want to add a subtotal of. And it looks like in this data, the important thing is probably the appraised value. We can also do some things down here, break between groups. So if we want a page break between every category, so when I print it, it automatically, installations are on one page, paintings are on one page, so that it's a new total, we could do that. I'm just going to leave it at this and click OK. Okay, you'll notice what happens is if we come up here, it threw down a subtotal for every break in category. So installation, painting, boom, 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 all those good things. Now, what's nice is we have on the left-hand side, you have another option available to you. You see this pane over here? When we see pluses and minuses, what do those typically mean in interfaces? Pluses and minuses mean what? Expand and collapse, okay? Expand and collapse. We can also do that with, we are in category 2, we're in view 2. If we go to view 1, so click on the 1 up here. I don't want 1, I guess. Did yours work? Mine did.
I don't have the 1, 2, and 3 showing, but I have all the categories separated.
Does anyone else not have the categories? The outline 1, 2, 3? You guys all have the 1, 2, 3? You don't either? Let's see. Does everyone, who doesn't have the, just Leah and, okay, let me take a look. You do have all the total breaks though, yes? Your show detail and high detail were grayed out for some reason. Not sure why. Let me see. I'll have to figure that out. I'm not sure why yours aren't showing. But these are various levels of the sort. So if we go to, I think by default we're on 3, which is all the detail. If we go to 2, you'll see 2 gives us all the category breaks. So we have installation, painting total, sculpture total, textile total. So it's just showing us, everything is still there, but it's just showing us the category breaks. I think if we go to 1, that's the highest level, so that should just be the grand total, okay? If we can see that somewhere, I can't see it for some reason, but that should just be the grand total. So I'm gonna go back to 3 to give us all the detail. Let's go to subtotal again, and go to subtotal again. I want to remove all. I want to go back to where it was. So go into the table and click remove all. And I should be back to without any page breaks. Okay, so how would I do this? Think about it if I wanted a subtotal by category, and then within category, I wanted to know a subtotal by condition. What do you think? What would I have to do differently here? What would I have to do? So for every category, and within that, every installation, I want a subtotal. So I want to know how many installations, what's the total value of installations that are excellent, installations that are good? What's the total of paintings that are excellent, paintings that are good? How would I do that? What do you guys think I'd have to do?
Sort by category.
And?
Then condition.
Okay, so one thing I have to do is put it into a format I can work with. So I'm going to highlight A through H. I'm going to go to sort. So I'm going to sort by category, which I just did. And I'm going to add a level to sort it by condition as well. And I'm going to click OK. So now I have installation, excellent, good, okay, painting, all the excellents are together, all the fairs are good together, all the goods are together. Yours might be in a different order because we did that custom sort. You guys remember that custom sort? So it might be in a little different order there. But if I go to subtotal now, okay, I want to put a subtotal at each change in what? What do you think I want a subtotal at each change in what now?
Condition.
Condition. I want the micro level. Okay, so at each change in condition, and I'm going to leave it as sum. I'm going to leave all this stuff the same. I'm going to click OK. And now you see, so for installation, I get the excellent total. For the good, I get the good total. And then under painting, all the excellent ones are together, all the fair together, all the good are together. And I'll find out, Brandon and Leah, why yours are, you didn't have those buttons. I'm sure that's something we need to turn on, but I'm not sure where you turn that on at. Okay, go up to subtotal again and click remove all. Okay, the next tool we're going to go through is, as I said, something that I know you guys have seen before, but probably we didn't spend as much time on it as we will in this class. So what I'd like to focus on is the pivot table. I can find it here. Oops, there it is. Okay, so for the pivot table is a way to slice and dice data a little bit differently than the table allows you to do. This allows us to take it and create another window to analyze it a little bit separately. And a lot of times this is called like an online analytical processing tool. Online meaning we can interact with it, right? The user can change things up on the fly. So at the top here we see first thing, it says an interactive table. That means the user, if they know how to use it, can interact with it. We are going to have value fields. These are sometimes called the measures when we talk about an online analytical processing. We are going to be able to create something called a pivot chart, which is based on the data that we find in the pivot table. We are going to create something called a slicer. A slicer is a visual way for someone to interact with this, so we can have them, instead of using drop downs, they can push buttons on a graphic. We have categories, and category fields can be at the column level, the row level, or it can be a filter on top. And we're going to talk about this interface a little bit more. So let's go back to our data. And what I want to do is, again, I want to highlight all of this data for my art table. So A through H. So highlight it all. And go up to insert. And this time we're going to insert a pivot table. Okay, if we didn't highlight all our data, we could just say insert pivot table. And the first thing it asks me is where is your table or range that you want to create a pivot table off of. Okay, and we're using a range here, A through H. If this would have been in a table format, I could have just put in the table name, like art objects, okay? Instead of giving it the range, I could have referenced it here as a whole table. And it says, where do you want this? I could keep it in the existing worksheet, but I prefer to put it in a new worksheet, so I'm going to click OK. Okay, now a couple things. How many people's look like mine up here? Okay. Does anyone have like a grid? No one has a grid? Okay. A lot of people prefer the grid, and they call that the classic pivot table. So I'm gonna put it in that format. You can use it as it sits here, or we can put it in the classic pivot table. I prefer the classic. So if we go under pivot table tools, now you see we have tools. You'll see a couple things under options. See options over here in the far left? Okay, there is an option under here called display. And we can check classic pivot table layout. Enables dragging of fields in the grid. So it's going to give us the grid. So now yours looks like this. Which is something we're probably more familiar with. It doesn't matter, it's just aesthetics. All right, a couple things. Over there under options as well, you see we can name our pivot table something as well. It's called pivot table 1 by default. Let's call it art pivot. And now we can reference it as art pivot instead of pivot table 1. Okay, so I want to show you what these things represent. So this area up here where it says drop report fields here is the same as this box down here that says report filter. Okay, so anything I do here will show up here and vice versa. Okay, so this is just a graphical way of looking at this box. The column labels obviously are this category here. So if I drop a field here, it's going to be show down in this box. The row labels, the same thing over here, and the values correlates to this. So without the original thing didn't have the classic pivot table, we don't really need it. We can just work down here, or we could drag to over there. So it wants us to create a pivot table, and it wants us first to just do I believe a one-dimensional pivot table. So what we're going to do is drag location. And I could do it one of two ways. I could drag location and drop it over here in the row fields here area, or I could drop it here in the row labels here. So it doesn't matter, you're going to get the same result. Or not. And the result should look like that. Okay, so we have the location, but we want to do something by location. So think about, we kind of did this a little bit when we did the subtotal, but it was kind of cumbersome, kind of clunky to work with. I prefer the pivot table. So we're going to take that appraised value, which is the important measure, and we can do one of two things with it. We can drop it under values here, or we can drop it in value fields here. It's going to do the same thing. Now it's hard to say what yours did with it because I've seen different Excel versions do different things with it. By default, mine counted it here. Did anyone sum Does anyone have big numbers there, or did everyone count it? They counted? Okay, count provides us some information. We know there are 6 items in the courtyard. We know there are 90 in the pavilion. But appraised value is what we're concerned with, so we probably don't want to count this. We probably want to do what with it? What function do we want to do on appraised value? We probably want to sum it, okay? So a couple of things we can do. And I can show you 3 or 4 ways to get to this. I'll show you 3 ways to get to this. One way we can get to this interface, and as long as you know one way, is if I right-click on any of these fields and go down to Value Field Settings. It'll take me to that dialog. Okay. The other way I can do it is under Values, I can click the drop down and go to Value Field Settings. Okay. The other way I can do it is if I'm on the pivot table, and you see I'm clicked on that field that I right-clicked on, up in the upper left-hand corner, it says Active Field. Okay, that's the group. And I can say, hey, Field Settings for the active group. So I don't care how you get there, but let's get to that dialog, okay, where we have, we can change the value field settings. So a couple things. Instead of counting, I want to sum. So click Sum here and click OK. And now we have a total for each of those categories. Now, what do you think's wrong with that sum? It's right. Mathematically it's right, but display-wise, not so nice. I probably want to show it in currency format because we're talking about dollars here, right? So if I go to that value field settings again for that active cell, you see down below it says number format. See that in the very bottom box? And I could change it to currency there. Now perhaps I want to show this by both the location, but also the category of item. Okay, if it's a painting, if it's an installation, if it's a sculpture. A couple ways I could do this. One way, because we have 2 dimensions to work with by default, is probably the best way is to take that category and drag it in here under column labels. Okay, but what if I wanted to perform, I wanted to look at it this way, but I also wanted to see this by condition. There's a couple things I could do, but we have 2 dimensions here we can work with. How can we kind of get a 3rd dimension, something that we can interact with it? What else could we use as part of the pivot table? God bless you. We can use the filter option. So if we take condition and drag that under report filter, now we have a drop down we can interact with. If we go under condition, by default it's all, but perhaps I only want to see the items that are excellent. Okay, now I have the items that are excellent. Perhaps I just want to see the items that are fair. Okay, those are the items that are fair. Instead of let's remove that. Well, let's go back to all there. And instead of showing it as a filter, which I have to kind of drop down and interact with it, I could also take that location or that condition and let's drag it and place it under a location. And now, instead of me having to select excellent or select good, I'm breaking it out at that level as well. So we see, for example, for the courtyard, we have two things, excellent and good, and there are the values associated with that. So we can get that level of detail. If along with, I'm going to remove that. So let's remove the condition. Click on the drop down and then just say remove field. And you see there we can move it to values, move it to column labels, move it to report filler here. I'm just going to remove the field. And let's see, I want to see also the sum of appraised value, but also the number of things I'm dealing with. Where do you think that would go? How would we do that? Like, I want to see the appraised value, but also the number of items that constitute that appraised value. What could I do in that case? I want to see the sum of the appraised value, but I also want to see the number of items that make up that appraised value. What else can I do? Well, I can drag, and it wouldn't really matter because I'm going to count it, so it wouldn't really matter what field it is. But let's drag Art ID because I know that's a field that everyone has. Okay, now I have count of Art ID. So for everyone, I have the appraised value and the count. A couple things not nice with this. Count of Art ID might be a little bit much. Sum of appraised value might be a little bit much. And they kind of make our columns too wide because it's trying to fit that as well. Let's change that. So we're under count of Art ID. You see up here it says active field. Well, we can rename this. We can just say, I don't know, I like to use N for the size. And appraised value, let's also change that. So let's say instead of sum of appraised value, let's just say appraised we'll change that to amount. And if we just highlight all those cells and double click between, it'll get it to a point where it fits everything. And now we're seeing everything on one screen again. Okay, my options went away because I'm not clicked on that. Let's click back on the pivot table, and we have all our options back. Okay, it's 9:33. I said only about half the time, so I went over. So I'm going to stop there. You can save it. I'm going to save mine. And then we will start there on Wednesday. And you can use the rest of the time as well.